Imagine you are standing at a bustling airport check-in counter, suitcase packed, heart set on the neon lights of Shinjuku or the quiet temples of Kyoto. You're from a country that has enjoyed visa-free travel to Japan for decades, the kind of golden passport that usually means you just buy a ticket and go. But as you hand over your documents, the agent's expression shifts. They tap a few keys, frown at the monitor, and deliver the news that stops your heart. I'm sorry, you haven't been cleared by Jesta. You aren't allowed to board this flight. For millions of travelers, the dream of a frictionless, spontaneous trip to the land of the rising sun is about to hit a digital wall. The Japanese government has just pulled back the curtain on a massive legal overhaul that changes the very definition of entry. By 2028, the new Jesta System, modeled after the rigorous American ESTA, will require every visa-exempt tourist to submit their occupation, their exact travel plans, and their personal history to a screening algorithm long before they even see a plane. If the computer says no, the airline is legally obligated to leave you on the tarmac. But the story doesn't end at the tourist gate. There is a much quieter, sharper sting hidden in this amendment that targets those who have already made Japan their home. While the government promises shorter lines and facial recognition for visitors, it is simultaneously preparing to skyrocket the cost of staying. We aren't talking about a small administrative adjustment. We're looking at fee ceilings for residency renewals and permanent residency, jumping from a few thousand yen to a staggering 100,000 or even 300,000 yen. It raises a haunting question. Is Japan truly trying to modernize its borders? Or is it pivoting toward a future where entry and residency are no longer a matter of policy, but a premium luxury? Why is a nation so reliant on global connections suddenly building such high financial and digital fences? To understand the real impact of these efficiency measures, we have to look at what's actually happening behind the screens of the Immigration Bureau.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really stark way to frame it. But honestly, it is entirely grounded in the legal amendments we are unpacking today.
Yes. Everyone, today we're looking at a fundamental re-architecture of the Japanese border.
Right. It's not just about, tweaking tourism numbers or raising administrative fees. We are looking at how a nation state decides who gets to enter, who gets to stay, and how much they have to pay for the privilege.
Exactly. And the documentation we have for this deep dive is extensive. We are talking about Ministry of Justice policy outlines, the actual text of the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act amendments, and economic strategies like the Grand Design 2025.
And when you put all those documents together, you don't just see a tightening of rules, you see a massive shift in philosophy.
Yeah, and that's our core mission today. We want to analyze exactly how this new digital pre-screening Jesta and this huge restructuring of visa fees reflect a much broader trend in East Asia.
Because you have a country facing a demographic crisis, right? An aging population, a shrinking workforce. They are desperately trying to thread this very difficult needle.
The need for foreign talent versus the desire for control.
Exactly. They have an absolute economic need for foreign labor and tourism revenue. But that need is colliding head-on with this really intense desire for national security and bureaucratic efficiency.
It's basically this massive friction between, we need you to come here, and we don't completely trust you.
That is exactly the dynamic. And to understand what that actually means for people, we have to look beyond the statutes. We need to look at the people on the ground.
Right.
And the first place where this friction is getting really palpable is in the implementation of Jesta itself.
Right, the digital gatekeepers. And we have a perfect example of this in the materials. Let's talk about Sato.
Yeah, his situation is so revealing.
It really illustrates the stakes here for the listener. Because Sato, he's in some policymaker in Tokyo. He's an elderly craftsman in a shrinking rural town. He runs this traditional textile workshop that has been in his family for over 200 years.
Which is exactly the kind of cultural heritage Japan markets to the world.
Exactly. You picture the wooden looms, the indigo dye, that whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
But the reality of his town is just silence. The young people have all left for Osaka or Tokyo.
The depopulation is severe. Yeah.
So he has been struggling for a decade to find a successor. He couldn't find a single local Japanese youth willing to take on the trade. It's hard work, it's remote, and it definitely doesn't pay a Tokyo corporate salary.
Right.
So the survival of this 200-year-old legacy rests entirely on an apprentice he recruited from Southeast Asia. That apprentice is literally the lifeblood of his workshop.
And this is not an isolated case. This is playing out across thousands of small businesses in Japan right now. Agriculture, construction, traditional crafts, they're being kept on life support by foreign labor.
But here is where the new policy hits home. When Sato learned about Jesta, He didn't view it as some great security upgrade. He was terrified. He expressed this profound anxiety that the system could create a digital flag that blocks the very people he relies on.
His fear makes total sense when you look at the opacity of algorithmic systems. Because Jesta acts as a pre-filter. Before a traveler even gets to the airport, they have to be cleared by this database.
And Sato's concern is just a simple error, right? Like a typo in a name, or maybe they misunderstand a question about their travel history.
Or a false positive flag by the algorithm. Any of that could block his apprentice from entering the country.
And once the computer says no, there's no human at the counter to plead your case to.
That is the critical change. In the current system, an immigration officer at the border makes a judgment call. There's a human element. But Jesta moves that decision to a server farm.
Weeks in advance.
And if the algorithm denies the authorization, the airline is legally obligated to deny boarding. So Sato is sitting there worrying that the efficiency the government is promising is actually just a wall.
A wall that filters out the exact people his town needs to survive. It's this wild paradox of automation.
Yeah.
You streamline the process for the millions of tourists, but you create a hard stop for the edge cases.
And for a rural economy hanging by a thread, those edge cases are everything.
So let's break down the actual mechanics of Jesta for you guys listening, just to understand why it's causing so much anxiety. Jesta stands for the Japan Electronic System for Travel Authorization.
Right, and it is heavily modeled after the U.S. Visa system.
Which, if you are American, you are very familiar with. But for travelers going to Japan, this is a massive sea change.
For decades, Japan has had visa exemption arrangements with 71 countries and regions, the US, the UK, Australia, most of the EU. If you held a passport from one of those places, you just showed up.
You filled out the little landing card on the plane, got your passport stickered, and you were in.
That system is effectively ending. The government actually moved the timeline up. It was originally discussed for 2030, but the official launch is now targeted for the end of fiscal year 2028.
So less than 3 years away.
Right. And the new process requires action long before you depart. Travelers will have to log into the Jesta portal online. They have to declare their purpose of travel, give exact details of their accommodation, and answer questions about their personal history.
Personal history is such a vague term. What exactly are they looking for?
Based on the Eastall model and the policy outlines we have, this will likely include questions about criminal records, past deportations, and potentially travel history to specific conflict zones.
And then there's the fee.
Yes. The estimated cost is around 6,000 Japanese yen, so roughly $40 US.
Which acts as a barrier in itself for some.
Yeah.
But the enforcement mechanism is what really creates that fortress aspect you mentioned. Let's talk about the airline's obligation.
This is known as the prohibition of transport. The amendment places the heavy burden of enforcement directly on the air carriers. If a passenger does not have a clear status in the Jesta database, the airline is prohibited from transporting them to Japan.
So they are effectively deputizing the check-in agent as an immigration officer.
Exactly. The border isn't at Narita Airport or Haneda anymore. The border is the check-in desk at Heathrow or JFK or Sydney.
Or even earlier, it's on your smartphone when you hit submit.
Right.
So what is the official justification for all this? Why build this massive digital wall now?
The stated rationale from the Ministry of Justice is the Zero Illegal Residence Plan.
They want to reduce the number of illegal residents by half by 2030.
Currently, there are estimated to be just over 70,000 illegal residents in Japan. These are mostly people who entered legally but overstayed their visas.
Okay.
The government views the current visa-exempt entry system as a massive loophole. The logic is that people enter as tourists without any real pre-scrutiny, they disappear into the labor market, and they work illegally.
So Jesta is designed to identify and block those potential overstayers before they ever set foot on Japanese soil. But 70,000 people in a country of over 120 million. That almost seems like a statistical error. Is building this incredibly complex, expensive digital infrastructure really worth it for that number?
That is the core debate. The government argues it is about creating smart borders. They claim that by pre-screening travelers, they can actually streamline the arrival process for legitimate tourists.
So shorter lines.
Shorter lines, automated facial recognition gates, fingerprinting upon arrival for those who are cleared. They point out that their tourism target is 60 million visitors by 2030. They had nearly 37 million in 2024. And they argue they physically cannot rely on human officers to check every single passport in depth at that volume. They need the algorithm to do the heavy lifting.
So the pitch to the public is efficiency. Give their data, pay the $40, and you'll breeze through the airport.
But as Sato's story highlights, Replacing human judgment with algorithms inherently creates a digital fortress. If the system works perfectly, sure, it's efficient. But if the system has a bias or an error, or if you just don't fit the standard profile of a tourist, you are locked out. Accessibility is being entirely sacrificed for security and processing speed.
Okay, so Jesta is locking down the front door for tourists.
Yeah.
But there is a separate, and honestly perhaps even more significant shift happening for the people already inside, the people living and working in Japan right now.
This is where we see the financial barrier rising to meet the digital one.
Let's bring in the situation of Elena. This really gets to the psychological impact of what's happening.
Elena's case is fascinating because she is the exact demographic the government claims they want.
Right. She is a long-term resident in Tokyo. She works in the tech sector. She's been in Japan for nearly a decade. She is highly skilled, tax-paying, integrated. She is the model immigrant.
She represents the human capital that the Prime Minister's economic plans are desperate to secure.
But when the news of the upcoming fee hikes broke, Elena didn't just calculate the cost in yen. She described it as a loyalty tax.
A loyalty tax, the phrase.
She spoke about this profound feeling of existential alienation. Like, she's riding the Yamanote line to work, surrounded by the city she calls home. But she feels like her subscription to Japanese society is constantly being audited by a cold bureaucracy.
The concept of residency as a subscription service is incredibly potent. It implies that your presence there is conditional, it's transactional, and it's subject to price hikes at the whims of the service provider.
So let's break down the numbers that are causing this feeling, because we are not talking about small inflation adjustments here.
No, this is a complete paradigm shift. For context, Japanese visa fees have been incredibly low for decades. They really haven't been significantly raised since 1978.
Wow, 1970.
Yeah. A standard residence permit renewal right now costs about 4,000 yen. It's a few lunches. It is drastically lower than the G7 average.
And the Ministry of Justice is very quick to point that out, right?
Absolutely. They point out that the UK charges over 100,000 yen for similar services, and the US charges nearly $200.
So the government is arguing for market rate adjustments. The beneficiary pays.
That is the official principle they're citing. Beneficiary pays. The argument is that Japanese taxpayers should not have to subsidize the administrative costs of foreign residents. If you use the immigration system, you should pay for the infrastructure.
Which makes sense on paper. But the proposed ceilings in these documents are shocking.
The proposal for fiscal year 2026 allows for a ceiling of roughly 40,000 yen for general residence renewals.
40,000. So that is a tenfold increase from the current 4,000 yen, a 1,000% increase.
Yes. But the real shock, the one that has terrified long-term residents, is for permanent residency, or PR.
Right.
Currently, the fee for PR is 8,000 yen. The new proposal sets a ceiling of roughly 100,000 yen. And internal discussions and reports suggest that depending on the final implementation and optional fast-track services, the cost could go as high as 300,000 yen.
300,000 yen. That is a massive amount of money. If you have a family of 4 listening to this, and you all hold permanent residency, you are looking at well over 1 million yen just to maintain your legal status every renewal cycle.
It creates a massive financial barrier, and fundamentally, it changes the nature of the status itself. PR was once viewed as a permanent anchor. You paid a small fee, you passed the strict requirements, and you were safe. You were almost equal to a citizen, minus voting rights.
Now, it is a premium luxury product.
And it's not just the entry fee that's the problem. The security of the status itself is being eroded. This is the part that scares many residents the most. The revocation of permanent residency.
Let's get into this because this is huge. Effective April 2027, there is a new legal amendment that allows the government to revoke permanent residency if the holder deliberately fails to pay taxes or social insurance premiums.
The key word there being deliberately.
Exactly. Deliberately is a very slippery word in a legal context.
It is incredibly subjective. Now, the government insists this is only targeting malicious tax evaders, people who have the money but just refuse to pay.
Right. They say it's not for people who just fall on hard times.
However, the legal framework is now officially in place. It makes PR entirely conditional on continuous financial compliance.
So if you lose your job, or you fall seriously ill, or you just have a sudden financial crisis, you aren't just worried about bankruptcy anymore. You are worried about deportation.
It completely removes the safety net. For low-income residents or families living paycheck to paycheck, this creates a deeply precarious existence. You are essentially one missed payment away from losing your right to stay in your home.
This is exactly what Elena meant by existential alienation. The state is sending a very clear signal that you are welcome here only as long as you are solvent and profitable.
And this premium approach isn't just for individuals, it extends to business owners as well. The business manager visa is seeing a very similar, very aggressive overhaul.
Because the business manager visa is the category for entrepreneurs, right?
Yes. Historically, it was actually relatively accessible compared to other countries. You needed 5 million yen in capital, which is about 35,000 US dollars, depending on the exchange rate.
Which is doable for a lot of people saving up.
Right. It allowed for what you might call lifestyle entrepreneurs, people moving to Japan to open small cafes, independent design firms, vintage clothing shops.
So what are the new rules for them?
Starting in October 2025, that capital requirement is being raised from 5 million yen to 30 million yen.
30 million yen. That is a six-fold increase. That eliminates almost all small-scale independent businesses right out of the gate.
And it gets stricter from there. You must now hire at least one local employee, either a Japanese national or a permanent resident.
Okay.
And you must demonstrate Japanese language proficiency at the N2 level, which is quite high business fluency, or you have to hire someone who can.
So the days of the scrappy foreign entrepreneur coming to Tokyo with a dream and a little bit of savings are officially over.
Yes. Japan is signaling very loudly that it wants foreign capital, but only serious capital. They want high-growth tech startups. They want established corporate branches. They are actively filtering out the small players.
It creates a completely tiered society. If you have 30 million yen in capital, or if you can comfortably afford a 300,000 yen PR fee, the doors are wide open for you.
Yeah.
If not, the wall is just too high to climb.
It is the gentrification of residency. And what's fascinating is how this stands in such stark contradiction to the government's own Grand Design 2025 plan.
Right, because that plan explicitly calls for attracting foreign talent to solve the severe labor shortage and boost wages. The broader economic policy is screaming, come in, but the immigration policy at the actual border is saying only if you can pay the premium cover charge.
Which brings us to the broader context here, because Japan isn't operating in a vacuum. This seems to be part of a much larger regional trend in East Asia.
It is absolutely essential to look at this from a comparative perspective. And the sources provide some crucial insight here through the observations of Min-jun. Right. Min-jun is a regional consultant who travels frequently between Seoul and Tokyo.
And he coined a term for this that I think is perfect: filtered openness.
Filtered openness. He compares Japan's new Jesta to South Korea's KETA system.
Because they are functionally almost identical. KET is South Korea's electronic travel authorization. And Min-jun describes standing in front of these automated kiosks in both Incheon Airport in Seoul and Haneda Airport in Tokyo.
And what's his takeaway?
The experience is incredibly sleek. It's modern, almost futuristic. The screens are high resolution. The biometric gates open automatically with a quick scan of your face. It feels entirely seamless. But the underlying logic of that machinery is deeply defensive.
Defensive modernization.
Exactly. Both Japan and South Korea are facing the exact same existential crisis. They have the fastest aging populations in the developed world. They know, mathematically and economically, that they must open up their borders. They desperately need foreign labor just to keep society functioning.
But they are deeply, deeply anxious about social cohesion and national identity.
They want the economic benefits of global immigration without any of the cultural disruption or friction that comes with it.
So they are using technology to try and resolve this paradox.
Mm-hmm.
By completely digitizing the border, they believe they can filter the flow of people with absolute precision.
They want to let in the high-value individuals, the tourists with money, the tech workers, the major investors, while automating the exclusion of anyone they deem a risk.
It's basically sorting the good immigrant from the bad immigrant before they even get on the airplane.
And we see this exact philosophy clearly reflected in the specific visa products Japan is now offering. Take the new digital nomad visa they recently launched.
Oh yeah, on the surface that looks like a huge opening up, right? Come work remotely from Japan.
But look at the actual requirements. To qualify, you must prove you earn an income of at least 10 million yen a year.
So filtering for wealth right away.
And the stay is strictly limited to 6 months. And the most important part, it is non-renewable.
That is the key right there, unrenewable.
They want you to come, spend your high foreign salary, stimulate the local economy, and then leave.
They do not want you to settle down.
Exactly. They don't want you using the healthcare system for the long term. They don't want you bringing your aging parents over. It is a strictly transactional relationship. You are a consumer, not a resident.
And contrast that with how they are starting to treat students.
Student visas are being aggressively tightened. The deadlines are much stricter now. For example, applications must be in by January 31st for an April start.
But didn't the government offer a simplification of documents?
They did, but only for graduates of what they classify as top universities or those who are already hired by trusted corporations.
It's just a meritocratic filter on steroids. If you have the elite credentials, the path is smoothed out for you. If you don't, the bureaucracy is designed to grind you down.
And we even see this with the blue-collar labor force. The specified skilled workers, the people Japan desperately needs for construction and nursing care.
They expanded that recently, right? The SSW2 category allows them to bring their families now.
They did expand it, but Min-jin points out that it comes with incredibly strict compliance rules. He notes that it feels like they're trying to manage cultural integration through an algorithm.
The idea that you can code harmony into a database.
Exactly. The Grand Design 2025 plan explicitly speaks about social integration and harmony, but the actual implementation on the ground, Jesta, the huge fee hikes, the revocation laws, it focuses almost entirely on strict control. It creates a complete dual structure.
Two distinct Japans.
Yes. There is the Japan of the Grand Design. This is an investment powerhouse seeking 100 trillion yen in foreign direct investment. It's welcoming 60 million tourists. It's desperate for young workers like Sato's apprentice to keep the traditional factories running.
And then there is the Japan of the Immigration Bureau.
Right. The Japan that builds a 300,000 yen financial wall around permanent residency. The Japan that implements Jesta to pre-screen every single tourist. The Japan that reserves the legal right to revoke your life there if you miss a tax payment.
It seems like the ultimate strategy here is to curate the entire population, like a luxury subscription service. Yeah, Japan Prime. You pay the high fee, you follow all the rules flawlessly, and you get the premium benefits. But if you slip up, or if you just can't afford the new rates, your service is canceled.
But the flaw in that logic is that a nation is not a subscription service.
Right.
A society relies on actual stakeholders. It relies on people who are deeply invested in the future of the community, not just transient customers who are only there for a transaction. If you treat residencies solely as a premium product, you are only going to attract people who will leave the exact moment the price is no longer right.
If the yen weakens further, or if South Korea or Singapore offers a better deal, those subscribers just churn. They cancel and leave.
And you are left with a hollowed-out society. Japan is making a massive bet right now. They are betting that they can use cutting-edge technology and harsh price signals to purchase globalization without actually paying the price of social change.
Purchasing globalization without paying the price of change. That is an incredibly dangerous illusion, and it's one that will inevitably fracture. As the digital gates of Jesta close in 2028, and as these staggering fee hikes take effect, we are all going to find out if a nation can truly curate its way out of the demographic collapse. It is a massive experiment in demographic engineering, and whether you are a tourist planning a 2-week trip or a long-term resident trying to navigate these new walls, the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. The digital fortress is being built right now, brick by brick, code by code. We will keep watching how this develops. Thank you for listening to this deep dive.